Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything, and welcome back to our third video in this series where I'm assembling the Dragon airship. In this video, this is the third and final video where I'm going to actually do all the construction. So right now, I have drilled a couple of holes with my pin vise into the top deck of the ship, and as you can probably see that I have primed the ship brown, and I've glued a small disc on where the fire elemental is, and I've also glued a couple of ramps that lead up to the top deck. Now what I've done is drilled a hole into the deck of the ship, and I've jammed a 1/8 inch dowel rod down that I've already painted black. Now I'm coating it with a little bit of that Elmer's water mixture, and I'm shoving it down into that hole, twisting all the while. And that Elmer's was going to soak into the foam board, and that's going to hold up the balloon. Now I've done this, or I'm going to need to do this 4 times. Now I should have already cut all 4 of the holes using my pin vise, drilling 4 holes for the 1/8 inch dowel rod, but sometimes you got to make a little bit of an adjustment, and you have to maybe do it a second time. That's what I'm doing right there. Alright, now again, like I said, this is the third and final video. I appreciate you guys coming out and checking out this video. What this is, it's an airship for Storm King's Thunder, which is a Dungeons and Dragons campaign module that I'm running my players through right now. And in one of the chapters, this is a spoiler alert, in one of the chapters, the players come in contact with an airship, and they are able to actually take possession of the airship. So I've made this model so that my players will actually have this airship on the table, and they can game around it, you know, as a 3-dimensional terrain piece. Now what I'm doing is I'm making these 4 posts, and what they're going to do is they're going to hold the balloon up, and the balloon is right there drying. It's probably already dry on the peanut can. Now just to let you know, if you haven't watched the other videos, just to let you know, this balloon is made out of dragon hide, so that's one reason why it's kind of misshapen and not necessarily perfectly round. It's made out of dragon hide, and it's from a variety of different dragons, and it will also be coated with a netting. I've got some cheesecloth that I'm using as netting that I've already sprayed brown. I do believe I've already sprayed it brown, and so we're going to use that. Alright, now the people that built this machine are they serve a red dragon, so the balloon was actually painted, the dragon hides were actually painted red, and so I'll be doing that as well. Okay, so that looks pretty good. That's going to hold up the balloon pretty well. This is the balloon, and this is where it would go. It's going to sit on these posts right above the fireplace right there. Yeah, it's still wet a little bit. Okay. Okay, so there is a lot of drying time in this construction. I think this is like my 3rd day of building this device, this model, because when you do the paper mache, you got to let the paper mache dry. When you glue the ship together, you got to let the ship dry. When you paint, you got to let the paint dry. Yeah, so there's actually quite a bit of drying time. That's the longest part of this building the ship. Now in the front, there's supposed to be a harpoon gun. This was an old dwarven bolt thrower that I had from my Grenadier days. I think this model has been around since the 80s, maybe even the 70s. And so what I'm doing is I'm just going to apply a little bit of glue on the bottom of it and stick it on the front of this ship. There's supposed to be a ballista actually on the back as well, but I just don't have a second ballista model laying around. Actually, I do have one, but it's going in my Hail Caesar army. You might notice that I've got some wax paper laying down, and that is because the ship and everything else does have a little bit of drippage from the water Elmer's mix that you see in the blue bowl. Alright, so now there is a harpoon gun right there for hunting down whatevers. Okay, so I'm going to let all this dry, and then we'll come back once I'm ready to start assembling the next part of it. I'm also going to prime the balloon black. Now this is the cheesecloth that I'm going to be using. I'm just going to set that off to the side. Alright, now with the balloon primed black, I'm going to use some of my apple barrel red, and I'm going to have to use, now I used a matte black, and there's going to be a gondola on the top. You can see how hard it is. And there's the matte black from Krylon. I probably should have used a gray. Now that I'm looking back on it, I probably should have used a gray primer instead of a black primer, because that red apple barrel that I've had, that I'm going to be using, is a very low pigment paint, and it doesn't stick to black very well, and so I had to use multiple coats. I think there was like 3, maybe even 4 coats of that red. Okay, I'm lowering this so that you can see a different angle of the ship with the balloon on top over the air. It's going to look just like that. And actually it's a double-decker ship, but I'm going to put the cheesecloth on top of it, and there's going to be a gondola at the top, on the top of that, but I'm not going to do any of that until I get the balloon painted. Now I'm using the, like I said, the apple barrel, which unfortunately, I knew this, it's just that I bought this apple barrel so long ago that I just wanted to go ahead and use it because I bought it a million years ago. It has no pigment. It's like all water with just a couple of flakes of red in it. It's actually pretty pathetic. It would be fine if I was painting directly on top of gray or on top of white, but because I primed black, it just doesn't have the coverage. Now I've got my paint palette right here, and I always put a layer of aluminum foil on my paint palettes so that when I need to do any cleanup, all I have to do is peel the aluminum foil off of the palette and then just throw the aluminum foil away and not have to worry about cleaning the palette. Right now I'm just making really a cup in the middle. I am also filling each of the individual palette bowls, but the main one is the cup in the middle so that I could do the red, because I'm going to use a lot of red paint. And I'm going to use a big brush. I thought about using the other brush, but this one's a little bit softer, and it won't. I felt that it wouldn't damage the balloon. It also would allow the paint to spread better. And I don't even thin this with water. I don't put anything on it. I just go straight paint. And you can see the kind of coating I'm getting. Now when it's wet like that, it looks good. But once it starts drying, it just basically turns black again. Okay, so let's go ahead and coat this entire balloon top to bottom. Now what I already talked about drying times, but you'll see that like I'll coat the top of this and then I'll let it dry. And then I'll have to flip it over and then I paint the bottom of it. And then I gotta let that dry. And then I flip it over and paint it. It's not like you can paint the whole thing in one sitting. I've got to paint the top or the bottom, let it dry before I can flip it over and paint the other side. And then I had to do multiple coats of that. So this actually was an all-day project, just painting this red. Because I would paint, let it dry for 30 minutes or so, flip it over, paint, let it dry for 30 minutes or so, and that was a few hours worth of painting. Alright, so now we got this sucker painted. What's the next step here? What we're going to do is, I don't remember. Build a gondola. Okay, so what I did was I got some normal foam board and I'm going to cut a disc. Now I grabbed a model of a miniature that had a very large base, and I was going to use that base as my template to cut out a circle. Now I know some gondolas might be square, some gondolas might be round. I decided to make mine round. Okay, so we put that down as a template in the corner there, use my pencil, draw a circle. Just like such. And this is an old HeroClix model, I think, and I've got them glued down on a old privateer press base. I think it might be a 40mm base. I don't even remember. And maybe it's 35mm. I don't remember. But I wanted it to be bigger than my standard D&D models, so that when I wanted to put a model up there, I could just put it in the gondola and there wouldn't be any issue with having enough room. And then I just use my X-Acto knife here and I cut a circle out of the foam board. Being sure not to cut myself, because that is very easy to do if you're using a knife. So just be very, very careful if you decide to make something like this. Very, very careful. Now you can't put the gondola on, but I could build it while I'm letting the paint dry. You can't put the gondola on until after you've already put the netting on, because the gondola goes above the netting. And all I'm going to do is cut a circle out of foam board, and then I'm going to use the cardstock to make the walls of the gondola. Here's the cardstock right here. I'm just going to cut a circle or a strip and then just glue it around in a circle. Yeah, just like that. Alright, now I apply some tacky glue around the foam board, and then and it's okay if I double up or make this an extra long piece of a strip because it'll just make it stronger. There you go. Put the foam closer to the bottom of the gondola. It doesn't have to be exactly on the bottom, but I did want it to be closer to the bottom. You know, kind of like that. And then what I'm going to do is put a rubber band around it to hold it in place. I'm using my thumb to kind of push it towards the bottom. There we go. Using the table and the wax paper to kind of allow me to level it out. Then I'm going to use a rubber band, and I'm applying the rubber band over the foam board itself and not in the center, because if you did that, it would just crush the cardstock. So you have to do it over the foam board, where the foam board gives your rubber band support, so it doesn't destroy the. Gotta get my thumb out of there. So it doesn't destroy the cardstock walls of your gondola, of your crow's nest. Not the gondola. The gondola is actually the ship. The thing that goes above the balloon is actually the crow's nest. The only way to access the crow's nest is by climbing up the ropes. It's good, just making it all level and even and stuff like that. And it will eventually sit right there on the top of that thing. Okay. I'm going to set this off to the side. And then we'll start painting the bottom of the balloon. I'm going to let that dry and we'll be right back. Alright, it dried, so now we're going to go ahead and paint a little bit of the bottom of the balloon. You can kind of tell it's kind of a lightweight thing here. Notice there was a little bit of drippage. Decided to hit the little drippage just to kind of disguise it a little bit. Alright, continuing on. You'll also want to notice that the balloon is not perfectly round, and it's also not perfectly centered. That is not intentional, but it is very acceptable because of the construction of the balloon. Okay, so I've got this whole thing coated red, top and bottom, multiple coats, and then what I'm doing is I'm applying some glue, not generously, I guess you would call it liberally. I don't know. I'm putting it on here in spots where I think the netting would stick to the balloon, you know, or touch the balloon or hold the balloon. So basically I'm just applying some glue all around the balloon so that when I lay the netting on, which you can see just to the left of the screen there, that is cheesecloth that you can get at your local hobby shop, or even I think you could even get it at a grocery store, but because a lot of times vegetables and cheese would be held with cheesecloth, and you'd bake with cheesecloth. But the cheesecloth that comes white, but I didn't want it to be white. I wanted it to be kind of reminiscent of rope. So what I did was I took it outside and I used brown spray paint, the same brown that I sprayed the crow's nest and the ship with. I went ahead and sprayed the cheesecloth with as well. So now it's got kind of a brown look to it. And then I'm going to take the cheesecloth and I'm going to lay it on top of the balloon. And allow it to stick to the glue, just like that. Now this cheesecloth is representing the ropes or the netting that holds the balloon down into place. So then I pull it tight, allowing the cheesecloth to stretch a little bit, because you do want the stretched cheese, and it will stretch a little bit. If you pull it too far, it'll start to tear because it's really not that strong. And then I'm patting it down to make sure that the Elmer's the Elmer's and water mixture kind of get a grip on the cheesecloth. And then yeah, my hand's getting all Elmer's-y. All right, and so I flipped it. Once it dries, I flip it over so that I can start applying the glue on the bottom for the bottom part of the balloon net. Now the balloon net on the bottom, I didn't want it to be flush with the balloon. I wanted it to go up at an angle to the apex where the vent is located. So I only put glue around the vent area and then glue the cheesecloth up to that spot. All right, let me get this ship out of the way, and then what we'll do is we'll put some glue directly on the vent, and then it'll angle up to the vent right there at the apex, and it won't necessarily touch the balloon all around the bottom. If it does, that's fine, but that wasn't my intention. And then once I get it glued up to the apex, then I just cut off any of the excess cheesecloth, and we'll have a gap there. So let's go ahead and apply some glue. And again, this is the same glue mixture that I mixed on day one. I have not added water, I have not added glue. It's the same glue. I've cleaned the brush a few times in between, but not adding any more glue. You can see there's drippage. That's fine. And what I'm trying to do is make it as even as possible up to the center apex point. I'm kind of pulling up all the little corners and cracks and trying to get it evenly pulled up into like a big hairnet. And then I'm squeezing it tight around the apex so that the Elmer's glue will glue into the cheesecloth. Just like that. And I'm dropping a rubber band on it to hold it nice and tight up around that apex. And it still will take a few hours to dry. And right now I'm just pulling and tucking and tightening and trying to get everything to fit nice and tight and secure, allowing when the glue to dry, that everything's going to have some Elmer's on it. Now I thought to myself, you know, I could just go ahead and cut this excess off right now and solve this problem. But I think I'm going to let that dry for a minute before I cut the excess off. Or maybe not. There we go. Now I'm going to use this excess cheesecloth that I painted brown as part of my frame on the ship, and I'll explain that here in just a minute once I undo this. Now I'm applying a little bit of extra glue around the edges just to give it that extra holding power right there at the apex, or the vent, or whatever you want to call it. Alright, and then I'll just move that off to the side and let that dry. Now I'm going to use this netting to bridge the gap of all four of the tops of these posts, so that when I put the balloon down inside, they won't move anywhere, they won't go anywhere. It's totally unnecessary because the cheesecloth on the balloon would probably hold it in place. But I figured I was going to do this anyway, just to give it a little extra support. And then I apply some tacky glue on there to hold it, and we work it out. Now you can see that I've got some of the cheesecloth hanging down. I do plan to cut out in between the poles and then use the excess that I've left behind to wrap around the poles, so that the poles look like they are rope or whatever and not just poles, even though they still look a lot like poles, even with them wrapped. You'll see. Okay, so I'm going to apply a little tacky glue to the top of these posts, and then I'm going to start to glue them and make sure that they stick to the tacky glue. And I'm going to pull it nice and tight There you go. And then we're just going to work our way around all 4 poles until it's completely encased in cheesecloth. There we go. Let's move on to the third post. And remember, I am going to cut out the inside of in between the posts, and then leave a little excess along the post to glue against the post. Yeah. That looks good. Alright, now let's go ahead and get this completely wrapped. Alright, so now I cut out the insides. Notice my lighting is not on or something. I don't know what's going on there. But I'm cutting out the inside of the sides, and I'm leaving a little bit of excess going up to following the poles. I think I've said that 3 times. Alright, now what I'm going to do is apply a little glue along all of the, that was a little excessive, a little longer than the ship needed, so I just cut off the excess. What I'm going to do is apply glue all along this post. And then I'll use my finger to kind of move it around to get the entire post covered in this glue. But I want it to be kind of excessive, a little, I want it to stick out quite a bit because I'm going to put multiple layers of cheesecloth on there. As it wraps, it's going to layer and layer and layer, and I want the glue to kind of go through all the layers. Okay. And then we wrap the cheesecloth around. And it is kind of tricky. It doesn't want to stick on the first pass. So I had to kind of wrap it, hold it. I'm twisting it in my hand right there. And then eventually it just started to stick. It took a moment, but eventually it got there. And then what you wind up having is a post that's got the cheesecloth wrapped all around it. It kind of looks like it could be a rope. Looks a little like that. Alright, so let me do all 4 posts like this, and then I'll be right back. Alright, so we got all 4 posts done, and then we've got the cross beams, all 4 posts are glued, and then it's pretty much close to being finished right now. I'm going to let some stuff dry, and then we'll come back and show you what the finished product looks like. I still have to put the gondola on, but it looks like it's going to fit right down inside there. I keep saying gondola when I really mean the crow's nest. Yeah, you can see that glue's not completely dry yet. Alright, so now that the glue's dry, I'm going to go ahead and show you how it's supposed to look. The balloon will fit on top just like that. Not exactly sure which way it goes, but and then the crow's nest will sit on top. I got this off centered, but the crow's nest will go right there. Now, before I put the crow's nest on, I think I put it on, and then I was like, well, you know, maybe I should make sure this balloon is right where it needs to be, and then I'll put the crow's nest where it needs to be. And that looks good. I'm digging in the box over here, grabbing the bottom deck. I'm going to put that underneath the gondola. And the camera's not really in a good spot for you to kind of see the whole balloon piece there, but this is almost completely 100% finished. There you go. You got the balloon, the gondola, and I'm moving the gondola is the ship underneath. It's moving around. And yeah, everything looks good there. It should sit right there. Balloon should sit right about there. Keep moving everything around. Because I don't want it to be glued down. I don't want the balloon to be glued. If I glued it down, it would have been so much easier. I could have used wires or something like that. But I wanted it to be removable so that we could play around it. But I guess there's a lot of gap there. We could still play around it even if I glued it. Alright guys, well thanks for coming out and checking out this video. I really appreciate you guys checking out this series. And if you want to see more videos like this, let me know. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, please hit the PayPal me link in the description below. And hopefully the players will enjoy this Wednesday. And I'll see you next time.